Okay. So that's where the problem was that we didn't select the proper database where we had the database where we selected iSCSI target, that we created a 100 gig volume, and then once we selected that, we were able to proceed. So let's go ahead and start the virtual machine, and let's jump right to the console. Now immediately it comes right up. We're going to use the build here, and what we want to do is we'll start off just loading it up to see if it's functioning. This way you're seeing the ISO image come up, and that way you can go right into the installation. So for this purpose, what we'll do is we're just going to let it run for a second and see if it's loading properly. And you also want to make sure that in some cases that maybe the ISO image, and this is why you want to test the ISO image, that it may not be, there could be a problem. So here we see that it's ready, the ISO image is functioning. Now we'll restart it and install it. And then this time we are going to select Run Software Installer. And again, we've just verified that the loading is fine. In some cases, if you're having issues where it's not loading, you probably want to try to use the MD5 checker, a free software program on the internet. We do provide MD5 files associated with the ISO images. That way you can verify your downloads. So this is another way of testing it. So please be aware that download the MD5, and this will check your ISO images. Now we do another check as well for the consistency of the files. So this helps you, although we test them, it's always good that we have another process to check the file consistencies. So as we are waiting through this process, it's only momentarily, then we'll begin the procedure for the installation methods. If you remember, we talked about some of the advantages of using, what to select, 32-bit mode or 64-bit mode. We'll go into that again. Here we go, we accept the agreements. And now we want to be able to install the ISO and the DSS from the ISO image, DSS v6, onto the 2 gigabit LUN that we created from VMware, and we're going to select SDA. The SDB was that 20 gig volume that we created that we're going to use. So we don't want to use that. Select OK. And again, we are going to use the 60-day trial. If you did have a product key, you can enter the product key right here. Or as you are installing and you reboot the DSS v6 into the GUI, you can go right into the GUI and copy and paste your product key, do a reboot, and then of course your product is now available and ready to be used. And then of course you want to go ahead and register it, which you could do an online or offline registration. Okay, as you can see, it's pretty quick, and it does a final check, and installation is done. At this point, I like to do a shutdown. The reason being is because we have the data store image of the NFS ISO image that's connected to it. We want to make sure we take that off. So here we're just going to shut it down. And we're going to go to right-click on the virtual machine, and we want to go to Edit Settings. And once that's complete to full shutdown, then we can go right into the CD and turn off the Connect on power. Oh, and one more thing, we can add another NIC while we're here. So let's add another Ethernet NIC, and we are complete. Now we can go ahead and start the DSS virtual machine. And select the default, which is 64-bit mode. Again, you can use 32-bit mode, and I want to finish that up while we're waiting for this to load up. The 32-bit mode can be used. The only problem is you cannot do volumes greater than 16 terabytes. So in 64-bit mode, you can have volumes as big as you wish. You get 100 terabyte logical volumes in many of them. But with 32-bit mode, you cannot. Your maximum is 16 terabytes. So bear that in mind. Also, there's just a little bit more improvement with the advances with the 64-bit mode than there is with the 32-bit mode. So, such as drivers, kernel releases, and also the performance, especially with some of the memory that's being used with the 64-bit mode. All right, so now we're in the loading process, and we're almost complete. We're going to go right into a console screen, and in the console screen, what we're going to want to do is change the IP address of the NIC's defaults. So for my sake and my purposes, because I already have the primary node at the last octet as 0 to 20, I do this for a reason to show you how you could set and change parameters in the console. Now you'll notice that we have an IP conflict. Very simply, what you do is you go Control-Alt-N, and this takes you right into the network settings. Many times when you do an installation, you're going to want to change it anyway right here before you access the GUI through a different IP address. So we'll select the last octet. We're going to change that to 223. If you want to enter the gateway, you can do that as well. But I would like to show you the GUI, but you can set every parameter in here for this value and also your DNS settings. So we'll let this apply the settings, and we can also do it for the other NIC. We can set that to a different value. And here we can even set this for, let's just say we want to set it for a 10x. It'll be 10.220. And hit apply. Keep in mind, if you're going to use multiple gateway IP addresses, one is your default. If you're going to add additional gateways to the NICs, please create a static route, and there's the routing tool, and we have documentation on that from the GUI. Now we're ready to go ahead and access the DSS v6, the virtual machine. Now let's go ahead and relog in. There we go, accept the keys. And you're going to be presented with the software license agreement. Just go ahead and click agree. And the default password is admin. And this is our new initial setup wizard that we have. And what we want to do is go ahead and click next. And of course, it's going to ask you to reset the password once more, or if you want to change it. For this purpose, we're just going to leave it as admin. It'll prompt you to the next screen. And we're going to be adding more of these wizards as we go along into the product development. And we feel that this phase is good enough to get you pretty much stabilized where you need to be. So the default NIC, what we have here is we set up the IP address, the subnet mask, the broadcast is auto. If I want to add the gateway, I can go ahead and do that. And I can even do DNS. All right, we'll click on next. Now, at any time, for experienced users, you can always cancel out this and set it manually. And you can click on, there's a little button down here, will allow you to not show this wizard at the login again. So let's set the IP addresses for this first NIC, which will be ETH0. Then you want to set your time zone. So in this case, we're going to do, we'll do America, New York, and click next. And of course, you want to set your time. Time is very important, especially for replications, backups, snapshot. You want to make sure that your timing is accurate. So typically, I like to do continuous adjusting for NTP values, and it'll reset. Here you can click on this value and be able to get your time settings properly. So you can change this however you want, or you can manually set it. For this purpose, we'll just keep going. Actually, we're going to do manual. There we go. And we'll set it for volume. Oh, that's right. I've got to use manual for this case because I'm in a different time zone. It's fighting, it's verifying, which is good. So here's what we'll do is we'll just set it for manual for this purpose and move forward. Set the DSS server name. So here you could say DSS for -VM for virtual machine. And any other commentary, storage notes that you want to place on the comment here. And this will also show up as a server name, so it's broadcasting as that as well. Now, one of the things that it'll give you at the summary at the list, again, you can stop this and say, don't show me the wizard the next time I log in, and then you're complete. Now you've come right to the beginning of where we always default to the help section in the help about. And here, we want to go right to our volume manager and into our volume groups. And there is the 20 gig volume that we created in the beginning. And we added our hard drive from the virtual machine. And of course, all existing data will be written, so it's formatting at this point in time. So we'll let this complete the format. And once this is done, you will see on the left side that the volume groups here by default will be VG00 as we started from the very beginning from the source and destination server. So at this point, I'd like to start taking questions if there are some. And here we go is the volume group, which now allows us to create logical volumes. So what I'd like to do is begin with some of the questions that we have. One question's coming in. Do we have to use the auto failover to work with the virtualization for the virtual machine for DSS v6? No. You can actually create an iSCSI target and you don't have to use auto failover. The auto failover function is really for your benefit. You will need 2 DSS systems to be able to auto failover in case the primary DSS server fails logically or physically, or if you're doing maintenance. You would want to be able to fail over to the secondary, which will immediately promote itself as the active server. So this way, I don't have any interruption as to the DSS, the virtual machine, or any virtual machine that is residing on DSS on its auto failover function. So this will help you greatly.